The Sweetwater Ledger, Part 1. Imagine sitting in a locked room, with nothing but a flickering lamp, a blank ledger, and the sound of your own heart pounding in your chest. Now imagine your husband standing across from you, his eyes colder than the steel of January frost, telling you exactly what you must write down. That was the reality for Catherine Brennan on a winter night in 1837 at Sweetwater Plantation in Georgia. A woman named Ruth, only 23 years old, was brought into that room. Terrified, trapped, with no choice in what was about to happen. And neither did Catherine. What she witnessed that night would not remain an isolated act of cruelty. It was the beginning of something far more calculated. Something monstrous. Sweetwater Plantation would become the stage for an experiment that twisted the already brutal system of slavery into something darker, colder, and more organized than anyone dared imagine. This is the story of the Sweetwater Ledger. Before we begin, subscribe to Liturgy of Fear and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapters of this haunting tale. And drop a comment telling us where you're listening from. We love seeing our community from all across America. Now, let's go back to Georgia in the 1830s. The world of Sweetwater. In the 1830s, Milledgeville was Georgia's capital. A city of red clay streets, white columned courthouses, and parlors filled with cigar smoke and whispered schemes. Just 20 miles away, where the Oconee River twisted through pine forests, stood Sweetwater Plantation. 2,000 acres of cotton. Dozens of enslaved people working the fields from sunrise to exhaustion. And overlooking it all was the big house, built in the Federal style, symmetrical, elegant, and designed so the master could see every inch of his domain. That master was Nathaniel Brennan. He inherited Sweetwater at only 28. People remembered him for his lean frame, his unnervingly pale gray eyes, and his obsession with order. Unlike other planters who sometimes dirtied their hands, Nathaniel never touched a plow. He studied ledgers, kept immaculate records, and wrote letters to men in Charleston and Savannah about scientific farming and rational management of resources. By resources, of course, he meant people too. Catherine's marriage. Catherine Haywood married Nathaniel in 1834. She was 19, he was 30. It was the kind of match their families expected, her father a wealthy merchant in Milledgeville, Nathaniel a respected planter. Catherine was no ordinary plantation wife. She had been educated at a finishing school in Augusta, could read Latin, play the pianoforte, and keep household accounts better than most men. Portraits later showed her with auburn hair pulled back severely, her face intelligent, sharp, not soft or dreamy. At first, life at Sweetwater followed the expected pattern. Catherine managed the household, planned dinners for Nathaniel's political friends, and tended a garden of herbs she used as medicine for the enslaved women who had no doctors. By outward appearances, she was the model Southern wife. But one thing was missing: children. By their second anniversary, Catherine's failure to conceive had become a quiet scandal. At church gatherings and tea parties, women whispered. Nathaniel never scolded her directly, but she saw how his jaw tightened when neighbors bragged about their growing families. In 1836, he brought a doctor from Augusta to examine her. For 3 days she endured humiliating tests. The doctor's conclusion was blunt: Catherine's womb was defective. She would never bear children. The proposal. Catherine braced for anger, but Nathaniel only grew calm, eerily calm. That night, over dinner, he told her he had been corresponding with men in Charleston about natural philosophy. They spoke of heredity, selective breeding, and ways to improve both crops and people. If Catherine could not give him an heir, he said, there were other methods. Legal methods. Methods already practiced quietly across the South. Catherine knew what he meant. Everyone did. Planters often fathered children with enslaved women. Those children inherited their mother's status and became property, profitable, stock, added to the plantation's wealth. Some men kept these liaisons secret. Others were shameless. But Nathaniel wanted something far worse. He didn't want to simply use enslaved women for heirs or profit. He wanted to make it systematic, controlled, documented, and he wanted Catherine involved. The first night, the first woman chosen was Ruth. She was 23, tall, and strong from years of field labor. On a cold January night in 1837, Ruth was brought to the east side of the house, to a room that once stored linens but had been stripped bare for this purpose. A chair in the corner. A desk with a blank ledger. A single oil lamp. Nathaniel ordered Catherine to sit. To observe. To record. Her diary entry later was only one line. God forgive me, I did as he commanded. I sat with pen and paper while my husband destroyed what remained of my dignity and Ruth's humanity. She did not cry out. That was the worst part, the silence. The ledger. Over the next weeks, Catherine realized Nathaniel's obsession ran deeper than she thought. He wasn't just exploiting Ruth. He was building an experiment. In a leather-bound ledger, separate from the plantation's account books, he ruled columns and headings like a scientist preparing a study. Catherine once saw a page by accident. Physical characteristics, estimated intelligence, projected value, disposition, breeding potential. Ruth was only the first entry. By April, Ruth was pregnant. Catherine confirmed it herself, recognizing the signs she had once longed for in her own body. Nathaniel marked the news with satisfaction, calmly adding to his ledger. In the following months, he chose more women. Grace, only 19. Dinah, a kitchen worker. Each time Catherine was forced to sit in that same corner, pen trembling in her hand, writing down notes as her husband carried out his plan. To survive it, she learned to dissociate. She focused on cracks in the plaster wall, the sound of crickets outside, the smell of lamp oil, anything but the horror in front of her. And while Nathaniel viewed it all as a kind of science, the enslaved community at Sweetwater knew the truth. The master was breeding them like livestock, and the mistress was forced to witness it. The beginning of the horror. What began that night in January 1837 was not a single act, but the first chapter of a nightmare that would spread far beyond Sweetwater. Catherine had no idea just how far her husband's network of like-minded men reached, or how deeply their secrets would stain George's history. The ledger was only beginning to fill, and Catherine Brennan had only just begun to understand the true cost of writing in it. Right finger if you found this story chilling. Make sure to subscribe to Liturgy of Fear. Part 2 is coming soon, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment below with your city or state so we know where our community is tuning in from. Would you like me to now draft part 2 in the same style, 1,000 words, continuing with the deepening of Nathaniel's experiment and Catherine's inner struggle? The Sweetwater Ledger, Part 2. Picture this. You're working in the cotton fields under the burning Georgia sun. You keep your head down, but you can feel it in the air. Something is wrong. The women move with hollow eyes. The men, who might have once stood tall, now carry a silence heavy as chains. They see what's happening. They know, but they can do nothing. At Sweetwater Plantation, fear had always been a companion. But in 1837, fear turned into something darker. It was no longer just the fear of the whip or the auction block. It was something deeper, an invisible pressure that made the whole plantation hum like a wire stretched too tight. And in July of that year, a visitor arrived who would take Nathaniel Brennan's private horrors and transform them into something far larger. Something colder. Something that would reach far beyond the red soil of Baldwin County. The doctor from Charleston. His name was Dr. Cornelius Hargrove. On a Thursday afternoon, his carriage rolled up the oak-lined drive of Sweetwater, its wheels kicking up red dust. Hargrove was in his 50s, heavy-set, with mutton-chopped whiskers and soft, pink hands that looked like they had never set a broken bone. At dinner that night, Catherine Brennan sat across from him, staring at her plate while he spoke. His specialty, he explained, was something he called anthropological medicine, the study of race and how characteristics passed down through bloodlines. It sounded like science, but it was nothing more than cruelty dressed up in medical words. Nathaniel had been corresponding with Hargrove for months, ever since he read the doctor's paper in a Charleston journal. The title was long and formal, Observations on the Hereditary Transmission of Physical and Mental Characteristics in the Negro Race. The paper argued that through careful selection, planters could breed more valuable enslaved populations. It was treated with respect in certain, educated, circles. Published, debated, whispered about in parlors where men with power smoked cigars and congratulated each other on their progress. That summer, Hargrove would stay at Sweetwater for 3 weeks. 3 weeks that turned horror into a system. Measuring humanity. From the moment he arrived, Hargrove got to work. He lined up the enslaved people of Sweetwater, one after another. He measured skulls with brass calipers. He studied the texture of their hair, the slope of their noses, the color of their eyes. He made them answer questions designed to test intelligence and temperament. Every detail went into a leather-bound book he had brought with him, filled with neat columns and clinical words. Catherine was forced to help him. She held his instruments. She copied his notes. She listened as he spoke of human beings as if they were horses to be graded, or cattle to be fattened. Worst of all, Hargrove studied the children. He bent their little heads to his measuring tools, scribbled predictions about their value in the future, and told Nathaniel which ones might be worth keeping, which ones might be worth trading. He never once called them children. He called them stock. In the evenings, after long days of measuring, Nathaniel and Hargrove sat together in the study, voices low behind closed doors. Catherine sometimes pressed her ear to the wood. What she heard made her blood turn cold. This wasn't just Nathaniel's private obsession anymore. Hargrove spoke of networks. He knew other planters who believed as Nathaniel did. Men who wanted to optimize bloodlines, who saw human children as commodities. Together, they dreamed of something bigger than Sweetwater, a system of breeding and trading children that could stretch across the South. The babies that vanished. It was Ruth, the young woman now carrying Nathaniel's child, who came to Catherine first. One morning in late August, when Nathaniel and Hargrove had gone to Milledgeville, Ruth appeared at the doorway of Catherine's morning room. Her hands twisted in front of her, her face pale with fear. She was 4 months pregnant now, her belly beginning to show beneath her work dress. "Mrs.," she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. "I need to tell you something. About the babies. The ones that been born here before you came." Catherine's chest tightened. She knew Nathaniel had fathered children before. It was common, almost expected of men like him. But the way Ruth said it made her breath catch. "Tell me," Catherine urged. Ruth glanced at the door, then back at Catherine. "Master Brennan been selecting certain babies," she whispered. "The lighter ones. The ones with eyes or hair like he want. After they born, after the mamas heal, men come at night in wagons. They take the babies. They tell the mamas they sold. But we don't never see 'em again. Not at the markets. Not on nearby places. They just gone." Catherine gripped the arm of her chair until her knuckles whitened. "How many?" she asked. "I don't know exact, Mrs. Maybe 20, maybe 25. Started before the old master died. But more since drive." Hargrove started coming. The room tilted around Catherine. She dismissed Ruth with a trembling hand and sat alone as sunlight crept across the floor. She thought of Nathaniel's ledger. She thought of Hargrove's network. And she understood with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about labor. This wasn't just about profit. This was about experimentation. Children taken like samples. Families destroyed for the sake of science. The confrontation. That night, when Nathaniel returned from Milledgeville, Catherine confronted him. It was the only time in their marriage she dared. She asked about the children. Where they had gone. What he and Hargrove were really doing. Nathaniel listened in silence, his gray eyes fixed on her. Then, without warning, he struck her across the face. The blow split her lip. She tasted blood. "You will never question me again, Catherine," he said in that calm, reasonable tone that made his words even more terrifying. "You are part of this. Your notes, your records, they are essential. You are complicit, and if you ever speak of this to anyone, I will have you committed to the Georgia Lunatic Asylum. One word from me, and you'll spend the rest of your life in chains, branded a madwoman." Catherine pressed her hand to her bleeding mouth and said nothing. But something inside her shifted. A final thread snapped. If she could not escape, If she could not expose Nathaniel without destroying herself, then she would become something else. Something stronger. Something hidden. She would not be his victim forever. She would become his undoing. The storms of 1837. That summer, the skies themselves seemed to echo Catherine's turmoil. Thunderstorms rolled across Georgia, drenching Baldwin County in sheets of rain. Cotton rotted in the fields. Planters fretted in Milledgeville about ruined harvests and lost profits. Nathaniel played the part of concerned neighbor in public. But privately, he cared little about the weather. His eyes were fixed only on his ledger, on Hargrove's plans, on the twisted future he was building at Sweetwater. And Catherine, her lips still healing from his strike, began planning too. Not for escape, not for survival, for vengeance. Right finger if this story unsettled you, make sure you're subscribed to Liturgy of Fear. Part 3 will reveal just how far Nathaniel's experiment reached, and how Catherine began to weave her own plan inside the shadows of Sweetwater. Drop a comment with your city or state. We love seeing where our listeners are tuning in from. Would you like me to continue part 3 by showing Catherine's secret resistance beginning to grow, while Nathaniel and Hargrove expand their network of planters? Sweetwater Plantation, Part 3, The Secret Son. Hook. What would you do if you discovered the man you lived with, the man you were bound to by marriage, was quietly raising a hidden child, a child meant to carry forward his darkest plans? Catherine Brennan was about to find out. And what she uncovered would shake her to her core. Part 3. In September, the first child of the project was born. Grace, one of the enslaved women, gave birth to a baby boy with pale skin and gray-green eyes. Nathaniel Brennan, the master of Sweetwater, stood over the child like a farmer appraising livestock. Dr. Hargrove, his partner in these twisted experiments, scribbled notes with cold precision. Nathaniel smiled with satisfaction. This was exactly the type of child they were hoping for. Within days, as Grace lay broken and bleeding in her bed, men came under cover of night. Catherine, Nathaniel's wife, watched from her window as they carried the swaddled infant away in a wagon. Just as Ruth, one of the older women, had warned, the children who looked the part were taken, sold, or hidden for some greater purpose. Grace was given only 2 days to recover before being forced back into the fields. She moved like a ghost, her body bound and leaking milk for a child she would never see again. Catherine had begun keeping her own secret records by then. Nathaniel and Hargrove tracked their breeding program in ledgers, but Catherine's diary was different. She wrote the women's names, their children's names, and noted which infants vanished. It was the only act of rebellion she could manage without being caught. But she was planning more. In her garden, Catherine studied the herbs her mother had once taught her about. She turned her attention to foxglove, a wild plant with dangerous power. In small doses, it strengthened the heart. In slightly larger amounts, it could slowly poison a man. She began to collect it. Dry it, grind it, store it. Revenge, she understood, would not come in a sudden strike. It would be a slow, patient campaign. By October, Ruth gave birth to a baby girl. This child's skin was darker, her features more typical. Nathaniel was disappointed. Hargrove wrote a dismissive note. But no men came to take her away. The baby stayed with her mother, given the name Martha. Catherine felt guilty relief. At least this one would not vanish into the night, though staying meant a life of slavery. The next month, tragedy struck. Dinah, another enslaved woman, gave birth to a stillborn son. She hemorrhaged badly, and despite Catherine's desperate attempts to save her, Dinah died 3 days later. Catherine buried her guilt along with Dinah. She had stood by and watched the abuse. She had written it down in Nathaniel's ledger. Now she had scrubbed Dinah's blood from the floor with her own trembling hands. Nathaniel showed no sorrow, only annoyance at the waste of resources. They buried Dinah in the rough cemetery behind the quarters. Catherine stood apart from the enslaved community as they sang low hymns. She felt their hatred burning into her as much as it burned toward her husband. And she did not blame them. She was complicit, but she was preparing. That winter, She began slipping powdered foxglove into Nathaniel's whiskey at night. Only the tiniest amount, enough to weaken, but not kill. Nathaniel soon complained of fatigue, nausea, and a lingering sickness he blamed on the cold season. Catherine smiled across the breakfast table as she poured his coffee. He suspected nothing. By spring, 1838, Nathaniel's health was fading. His pride kept him from calling a doctor. But when Hargrove visited in April, even he noticed the decline. He examined Nathaniel in private and recommended rest and a tonic. Catherine filled the prescription, but she carefully adjusted the poison. Too much, and Nathaniel might die before she was ready. Too little, and he might recover. She wanted him weak, dependent, unable to carry forward his experiments with the same force. But new trouble was already rising inside Sweetwater. Ruth was pregnant again, and so was Pearl, a chambermaid in the main house. Pearl was different, educated, sharp-eyed, and always quietly watching. Catherine sensed that Pearl was documenting everything in her own way, just as she was. They shared no words at first, but when their eyes met in the hallway, Catherine felt something pass between them. A secret understanding. One day in April, while Nathaniel and Hargrove rode into Milledgeville for a meeting, Catherine found Pearl alone in the laundry room. She sent the others away and dared to speak. "I know you've been watching," Catherine whispered. "I know you understand what my husband is doing." Pearl's hands stilled in the wash water. She studied Catherine with cautious eyes before replying. "What is it you want to know, Mrs.?" "Everything that might help me stop this," Catherine said. Pearl looked toward the door to make sure they were truly alone. Then, in a low, steady voice, she revealed the secret Nathaniel had hidden for years. "There's a boy. His name is Samuel. Born 8 years ago. His mama was Judith, one of the house women. Master Brennan kept Samuel because he was the first one who looked almost white. Gray eyes, light hair. He sold Judith away, but he kept the boy." Catherine froze. "Why have I never seen him?" "Because Master Brennan keeps him separate," Pearl answered. "He teaches him to read, to write, to think. He says Samuel is proof his theories work. And Mrs. Pearl lowered her voice to almost nothing. "They plan to use him. When he's grown, they'll make him father children himself. A whole line of people who look white but are still slaves. They'll sell them for fortunes." The words hit Catherine like a blade. Nathaniel had not only fathered a son, he was grooming him to continue the nightmare. Samuel was both victim and weapon, raised to inherit his father's twisted dream. Pearl's eyes met Catherine's. "That boy is smart. He knows what he is. And he is waiting. I don't know what for, but he's no obedient tool. Not like Master Brennan thinks." That evening at dinner, Catherine took a dangerous risk. She mentioned she had heard of a child on the property receiving lessons. Nathaniel's fork stopped midway to his mouth. His gray eyes locked on her. "Where did you hear that?" he asked, his voice low and sharp. "Servants talk," Catherine replied, her tone cool. "And I pay attention to my household." Nathaniel set his fork down slowly. "Samuel is part of the project. An experiment in potential. I would like to meet him," Catherine said firmly. "No," Nathaniel snapped. She met his gaze, unflinching. "I have witnessed everything else. Every birth, every death, every atrocity. Why should I not meet this child?" The room went still. Catherine had stepped into dangerous territory. But she no longer cared. She had seen too much. And now she wanted to see Samuel. Right finger, what do you think Catherine should do? If you were in her place, could you keep calm and play the long game? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story is pulling you in, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves dark history. The story of Sweetwater Plantation is only growing darker. Stay tuned for Part 4. Sweetwater Plantation, Part 4, The Hidden Cabin. Hook. Imagine discovering that your husband has been secretly raising a child in the shadows, an heir to his cruelty, groomed to carry on his twisted work. For Catherine Brennan, meeting Samuel, the hidden son of Sweetwater, would change everything. Part 4. The spring of 1838 had brought false warmth to Georgia. Buds swelled on the peach trees only to wither under sudden frost, a reminder that nature itself could be cruel. Inside Sweetwater, cruelty never slept. Catherine could not stop thinking about what Pearl had told her. The boy named Samuel, kept hidden in a cabin apart from the others, trained as proof of Nathaniel's theories. Catherine had seen many horrors, but this revelation cut deeper than most. Nathaniel wasn't just exploiting lives. He was shaping the future, crafting a legacy of suffering that could last for generations. And Samuel, only 8 years old, was at the center of it. That week, Catherine pressed Nathaniel again. Over supper, she asked with feigned calm. I want to see him. This Samuel. If I'm expected to play witness to your project, then I should see every part of it. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. His illness, worsened by Catherine's secret dosing of foxglove, made his face paler now, his hand tremble slightly as he lifted his cup. Still, his pride was intact. You will see him when I decide it's necessary, he snapped. But Catherine was learning patience. She let the conversation drop, masking her fury behind a composed smile. Inside, her resolve only deepened. A few nights later, she acted on her own. While Nathaniel drank himself into a fitful sleep, Catherine slipped from the house with only a lantern and her shawl. The frost-bitten grass crunched under her shoes as she crossed the property. Pearl's directions echoed in her mind. East side, past the barn. There it was, a small cabin, its window glowing faintly with lamplight. Catherine crept closer, her heart pounding. Through the cracked shutters, she saw him. A boy sat at a rough table, a book open before him. His skin was pale, his hair light brown, his eyes a sharp gray that caught the lamplight. He looked almost like any white child, but there was something unsettling in his stillness. He wasn't daydreaming, as most children might. He was reading with absolute focus, his small hand tracing the lines of text. Catherine pressed a hand to her mouth. This was Samuel, Nathaniel's hidden son. She dared a quiet knock. The boy's head snapped up. His eyes fixed on her through the slats, sharp and suspicious. Slowly, he rose and opened the door just wide enough to see her. You're not supposed to be here, he said. His voice was steady, almost too steady for a child. Catherine swallowed hard. I'm your father's wife, she whispered. I wanted to meet you. The boy studied her for a long, unnerving moment. Then, as if weighing some unspoken scale, he opened the door wider. Come in, then. The cabin smelled of ink, chalk, and old wood smoke. Books lined a crude shelf, Latin, mathematics, histories. Catherine stared in disbelief. Most white children in the county could barely write their names, yet here was an enslaved boy with a library. You've been taught all this? She asked softly. Yes, Samuel answered. Father says I'm proof. Proof that his ideas are right. The way he said, Father, made Catherine's skin crawl. Do you believe him? She asked. The boy's gray eyes flickered with something dangerous. I know what I am. I know what he wants from me. But I am not his tool. Catherine's breath caught. This child was not blind to his circumstances. He understood far too much for 8 years of age. Do you hate him? She whispered. A long silence. Then Samuel answered, very quietly, I am waiting. Catherine left the cabin shaken. The boy's intelligence was startling, his composure almost frightening. He was no ordinary child, he was a seed. Nathaniel had planted, but whether he would grow into Nathaniel's design or something else entirely, Catherine could not tell. She knew only one thing. Samuel could not be ignored. Nathaniel soon discovered Catherine's disobedience. It happened one afternoon when Samuel mentioned, casually, that the missus had visited. Nathaniel's fury was volcanic. That evening, he cornered Catherine in the study, slamming his fist against the desk. You will never interfere with my work again, he roared, his face flushed, veins bulging at his temples. The foxglove in his veins made him weaker, but his temper was as dangerous as ever. Catherine met his rage with icy calm. You brought me into this when you forced me to watch. I have seen every horror you've committed. Do you truly think you can hide your son from me? For a moment Nathaniel looked as if he might strike her. Instead, he leaned close, his voice venomous. That boy is the future. He will do what I command, long after I am gone. You will keep your distance. Catherine smiled coldly. We shall see. That summer, Pearl's pregnancy grew difficult. She confided in Catherine when no one else could be trusted. I think they mean to take my child, she whispered. If it looks too much like them. Catherine grasped her hand. Then we must be ready. The alliance between them was fragile but real. Catherine realized she was no longer alone in her quiet war. Pearl was watching, recording, resisting in her own way. And Samuel was waiting. Waiting for what? Catherine didn't know, but she feared the answer. By August, Nathaniel's health worsened. He stumbled often, his hands shook, and headaches made him lash out even more violently. Hargrove returned with new papers, talking in hushed tones about expansions and networks. Catherine guessed other plantations were involved now, other men copying the same twisted experiments. Sweetwater was not alone. It was just one thread in a spreading web of horror. Catherine's diary grew thicker. She recorded every name, every disappearance, every rumor Pearl whispered. But one entry she wrote with trembling hands. Samuel exists. He is different. He is dangerous. Perhaps more dangerous than Nathaniel himself. The enslaved community at Sweetwater also knew about Samuel, though they never spoke of him openly. Catherine saw the way men clenched their jaws when Nathaniel passed, the way women shielded their children tighter. They understood what Samuel represented, a future in chains that looked like freedom. And Catherine understood something else. If Samuel chose to rise against his father one day, he might destroy the Brennan legacy. But if he chose instead to carry on Nathaniel's vision, then the nightmare would never end. Right finger, what do you think? Is Samuel a victim who might become a savior, or is he destined to inherit his father's cruelty? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see how this dark history unfolds, hit that like button and share with someone who loves chilling stories. The darkness of Sweetwater is only deepening. Stay tuned for Part 5. Sweetwater Plantation, Part 5, Bloodlines. Hook. What if the very blood running through your veins was turned into an experiment? At Sweetwater Plantation, children weren't just born, they were measured, catalogued, and in some cases, taken away into the night. And in 1838, Catherine Brennan realized that the horrors she had seen were only the beginning. Part 5. By late summer, Sweetwater had taken on a strange quiet. The cicadas screamed in the trees, but inside the plantation house, something darker hummed. Nathaniel Brennan, once so full of cold energy, was beginning to fade. Catherine's careful poisonings had worked. Slowly, eating at his strength. He stumbled more often now. His handwriting wavered in the ledgers. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, clouded with pain. But even weakened, Nathaniel's obsession did not die. If anything, it grew more fevered. Every morning, he summoned Samuel to the study. Catherine, lingering in the hallway, heard the boy reading aloud in a calm, steady voice, Latin passages, arithmetic problems, histories of empire. Sometimes Nathaniel's voice would thunder in frustration, then Samuel's quieter, measured reply. It was not the sound of a father teaching a son. It was the sound of a master sharpening a blade. Pearl's pregnancy had become difficult. Her face was drawn, her steps slow. Catherine often found her in the kitchen, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other braced on the table for support. They'll take this child, Pearl whispered one evening, when Catherine brought her tea. If it looks too much like him, they'll take it. And if it doesn't, they'll treat it like nothing. Either way, I lose. Catherine felt the weight of those words. She could not lie. Pearl had seen the wagons come in the night just as Ruth had. She knew the truth. But Catherine also felt something stirring, an ember of defiance. Then we make sure, she whispered, that they never take another child again. Pearl's tired eyes searched hers, and for the first time, she allowed herself the smallest nod. That autumn, Hargrove returned. His portly figure waddled up the drive, brass calipers tucked under his arm, his whiskers twitching in excitement. He carried with him a thick packet of letters. At supper, Catherine listened as he and Nathaniel spoke of a growing circle of planters who wanted to improve the stock. The science is clear, Hargrove insisted, sipping his wine. With proper breeding, we can create generations of laborers stronger, more intelligent, more obedient. Already, several gentlemen in South Carolina and Louisiana are beginning programs similar to yours. Samuel is only the start. Catherine forced herself to smile and nod, though bile rose in her throat. The network was spreading like a plague. Later that night, when Nathaniel had retired to his study, Catherine slipped into her room and opened her secret diary. She wrote with shaking hands. They are building something larger than this place. A system of bloodlines, a hidden empire. I must act soon. One evening in October, Catherine found herself drawn again to the cabin where Samuel lived. The boy was outside, practicing figures with chalk on a slate. He looked up as she approached. "You shouldn't come here," he said calmly. "And yet here I am," Catherine answered. Samuel studied her. He was only 8, but there was an unnerving gravity in his gray eyes. "You hate him," he said simply. Catherine froze. "Who, father?" Samuel said. "You hate him. I see it in the way you look at him. The way you move when he enters a room." Catherine's throat went dry. "And what of you, Samuel? What do you feel toward him?" The boy hesitated, then answered in a whisper, "I am waiting." That same phrase again. Catherine felt a chill crawl up her spine. Samuel was not a child in the way children should be. He was a vessel filled with fury, taught too much, shaped too cruelly. Waiting for what? She pressed. His eyes locked on hers. For the right moment. Days turned into weeks. Nathaniel grew weaker but more vicious. His punishments for small infractions grew harsher. He beat a man nearly to death for failing to meet the cotton quota. He struck Ruth for answering too slowly. He was a dying man, but he would not relinquish control without violence. At the same time, whispers spread among the enslaved community. Catherine saw it in the way they gathered in small knots, their voices low but urgent. Something was building. Tension hung heavy in the air, thick as the smoke from the autumn harvest fires. One evening, Ruth found Catherine in the garden. "Mrs.," she said softly, her voice shaking. "We can't bear no more. They talking about running, about rising up. And if it comes to that, there'll be blood. So much blood." Catherine clasped her hands. She had prayed for resistance, for the cruelty of Sweetwater to end, but she also knew the price. If the enslaved people rose up, the county militia would come. Men would be hanged, women whipped, children scattered. She felt caught in a trap with no good choices. In November, Pearl went into labor. Catherine was summoned to her side, and for hours she worked feverishly, sweat beading on her brow, as Pearl screamed and bled. At last, a child emerged, a boy, his skin pale, his hair light. Catherine's heart sank. Nathaniel, weak but present, gave a thin smile. "Another promising line," he muttered. Pearl turned her face to the wall. 2 nights later, the wagon came. Catherine watched from her window as the bundle was carried into the night. Pearl's cries could be heard through the house, muffled, ragged, breaking something deep inside everyone who heard them. Catherine gripped the windowsill until her nails tore at the wood. "No more," she swore silently. "No more." By winter, Nathaniel was visibly ill. The foxglove had done its work. He could barely ride, his skin yellowed, his breath shallow. Hargrove fussed over him, prescribing tonics and urging rest, but Nathaniel dismissed them all. Still, even weakened, he clung to Samuel. Catherine often saw them together, the boy reading, Nathaniel correcting. Father and son, teacher and student, master and tool. It was Samuel who unsettled her most now. One evening, as Catherine passed the study door, she heard Nathaniel ask, "And what will you do, Samuel, if someone ever tries to stand in the way of our work?" The boy's answer came, calm and cold, "Remove them." Catherine's blood turned to ice. That night, she wrote in her diary by candlelight, "It is not only Nathaniel I must fear. Samuel too. The boy is sharp, but his heart may already be poisoned. If Nathaniel dies, what will he become?" The candle sputtered as if in warning. Catherine stared into the flame and felt dread coil inside her chest. Sweetwater's horrors were no longer bound to Nathaniel Brennan's failing body. They had already taken root in another, young, intelligent, and waiting. Right finger, do you think Samuel will turn against his father, or become something even worse? Share your thoughts below. And if this story chills you, hit the like button and pass it on to someone who loves dark history. The shadows of Sweetwater are only deepening. Stay with us for Part 6. Sweetwater Plantation, Part 6, The Night of Masks. Hook. Sometimes the worst monsters are not the ones that haunt the woods or rise from graves. Sometimes, they are the ones who wear fine clothes, sip wine, and call their cruelty progress. At Sweetwater Plantation, Catherine discovered that Nathaniel Brennan's obsession was no longer a secret, it was a society. Part 6. The year 1839 arrived in Sweetwater not with celebration, but with silence. The plantation seemed suspended in a dreadful stillness. Nathaniel Brennan's illness deepened, his cough rattled through the house, his steps dragged, his voice cracked with fatigue. Yet despite his failing body, Nathaniel moved with a new urgency. His hands shook, but his pen scratched furiously across letters. Couriers came and went daily, carrying sealed packages. He spoke often with Hargrove, their conversations clipped, feverish, secretive. Catherine began to piece together the truth. Nathaniel's work at Sweetwater had become a blueprint. Other planters, other gentlemen of science, were copying it. What had once been confined to the shadows of one estate was spreading like a stain across the South. And then came the invitation. One evening in March, as rain lashed the windows, Nathaniel handed Catherine a folded letter. His hand trembled slightly as she opened it. "You will attend with me," he said. The words were written in careful script. "The Society of Rational Advancement requests the pleasure of your company at a gathering, to be held at midnight, in the great hall of Evergreen Manor." Catherine's stomach turned. A society. Not a secret experiment, not a lone obsession, but an organized circle, men of wealth and influence, gathering to plan horrors in the name of progress. She smiled faintly, masking her revulsion. "Of course, Nathaniel. I will attend." Evergreen Manor stood 20 miles from Sweetwater, a sprawling estate known for its marble floors and grand ballroom. Catherine had been there once for a wedding, lace and music, laughter and light. But on that stormy night, Evergreen was transformed. Lanterns lined the long driveway, flickering in the rain. Servants in dark livery ushered guests into the hall. And every guest, Catherine realized with a jolt, wore a mask. Porcelain faces, gilded birds, snarling beasts. Masks of ivory, leather, and painted wood. They concealed not only identity, but humanity. Nathaniel's mask was a fox. He pressed one into Catherine's hands, a pale mask of a swan. "Do not remove it," he whispered. "Not until it is done." Inside, the ballroom was lit with hundreds of candles. Long tables were set with silver goblets and decanters of wine. Dozens of masked figures milled about, their voices low, their laughter hollow. At the far end, a stage had been erected. Upon it stood Hargrove, maskless, beaming with self-importance. His calipers gleamed in the candlelight. "Gentlemen," he declared, "and the few ladies who are worthy of witness, tonight we begin the true shaping of destiny." A hush fell. Catherine gripped her mask, her breath tight behind it. Hargrove continued. "The experiments at Sweetwater have proven the potential. We have bred intelligence with obedience. Strength with loyalty. This is not mere labor, it is legacy. A new generation, crafted by science, to serve and to thrive." The crowd murmured in approval, glasses raised. Catherine's stomach churned. Then, with a flourish, Hargrove beckoned. Two men in livery dragged forward a young boy. Barefoot, shackled, trembling. His eyes darted across the masked crowd in terror. "Observe," Hargrove said, lifting the boy's chin with his calipers. 8 years old, mixed blood, strong of limb, sharp of mind. He can read, write, and perform sums. A perfect specimen. The crowd leaned in, masks gleaming. Some clapped softly, others scribbled notes. Catherine bit her lip until she tasted blood. This was not science, it was theater. A grotesque performance where a child was paraded like livestock. Dash dash dash. At Nathaniel's side, Catherine felt him sway slightly. His illness was worsening, but his eyes burned behind the fox mask. He whispered, "Do you see, Catherine? What I began will outlive me." Her hands clenched. She wanted to scream, to tear the mask from her face, to strike him down where he stood. But she forced herself still. Patience. Patience, like Samuel, waiting for the right moment. Dash dash dash. The night dragged on. More children were brought forward. A girl with amber eyes who sang a hymn with a voice like glass. A boy who recited multiplication tables flawlessly. Each was measured, prodded, praised or dismissed. Catherine's mind reeled. This was not a plantation, it was a breeding ground, a hidden machine of flesh and blood. When at last the candles burned low, the masked guests gathered one final time before the stage. Hargrove lifted a glass. "To the future," he declared. "To the future," the crowd echoed. Wine spilled. Masks tilted back. Laughter rang out. And Catherine, still cloaked in her swan mask, made her vow. Dash dash dash. On the carriage ride home, Nathaniel slumped against the seat, exhausted but triumphant. "You see now, Catherine," he murmured, coughing into his handkerchief. "Sweetwater is no longer mine alone. It belongs to history." Catherine stared out at the storm-darkened fields. She thought of Pearl, broken by loss. She thought of Ruth, whispering of bloodshed. She thought of Samuel, waiting, always waiting. History, Nathaniel had said. But Catherine felt it more like a curse. Dash dash dash. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by candlelight, pen scratching furiously in her diary. The society grows. It wears masks of civility, but beneath them are wolves. Sweetwater is not one horror, it is a seed. If it spreads, the South itself will rot. Nathaniel must be stopped, but so too must his creation. The boy, Samuel. Her hand trembled as she wrote it. To fight Nathaniel was one thing. But Samuel, so young, so intelligent, yet so steeped in his father's poison, what might he become if left unchecked? The thought twisted her heart. Could she destroy him too? Dash dash dash. A week later, Catherine found Samuel by the stables. He was alone, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. "You went to Evergreen," he said without looking up. Her breath caught. "How do you know?" "I listen," Samuel said. "I watch. I hear father talk when he thinks I am asleep. He says you are learning. That one day, you will understand." Catherine crouched, lowering her voice. "And what do you think, Samuel?" The boy's knife paused. His gray eyes lifted to hers. "I think," he said slowly, "that when the time comes, I will decide who deserves to stay, and who deserves to be removed." The word again. Removed. Cold. Final. Catherine stood, her heart pounding. She realized then that Sweetwater's darkest creation was not the society, nor the experiments, nor even Nathaniel himself. It was the boy standing before her, knife in hand, waiting. Dash dash dash. Right finger, what do you think? Will Samuel become the destroyer of Sweetwater, or its heir? Comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to like and share if you want more of this chilling history. Stay with us for part 7, where Catherine makes her first true move against the society. Sweetwater Plantation, Part 7, Catherine's Secret War. Hook. Evil rarely announces itself with horns and fire. Sometimes it hides behind silk curtains, polite words, and silver spoons. But Catherine Brennan had seen through the mask, and in 1839, she began her secret war against the society. Dash dash dash. Part 7. Sweetwater sat heavy in the heat of midsummer. The fields buzzed with insects, the air thick with the scent of cotton and damp earth. But Catherine's mind no longer lingered on harvests or household duties. Her every thought was consumed with what she had seen at Evergreen Manor, the masked congregation of men who believed they could bend bloodlines to their will. And her husband, Nathaniel, frail but burning, was at the center of it all. That night of masks had changed something in Catherine. She could no longer be a silent recorder of atrocities. She had to act, slowly, quietly, carefully, because Nathaniel's threat still echoed in her ears. "One word from me, and you will spend the rest of your life in chains, a madwoman locked away." Dash dash dash. Her first step was small. She began reading Nathaniel's ledgers differently. Where once she copied numbers and descriptions without protest, now she studied them for patterns. Which families were broken, which children disappeared, which traits were most valued. The more she read, the more a map formed in her mind, a web of cruelty connecting Sweetwater to other plantations. She realized that the society was not merely experimenting, it was building archives, a living library of human bodies. Late one night, after Nathaniel had fallen asleep coughing into his pillow, Catherine lit a candle and unlocked his desk with a stolen key. She opened the hidden drawer at the bottom, the one she had only glimpsed before. Inside were letters sealed with wax, bearing the insignia of other estates. She unfolded one with trembling hands. To Brother Brennan, the girl of 10 years, with unusual amber eyes, arrived safely. Her voice is as you described, clear as glass. We shall test her capacity for memorization and report results. Catherine pressed the page to her lips, fighting nausea. They were passing children around like parcels, using words like test and capacity as if these were not living souls. She placed the letter back, careful not to disturb the wax too much. But she remembered every word. In the weeks that followed, Catherine began to act. She started with whispers. When she visited the cabins with medicines or sewing work, she lingered a little longer. She asked gentle questions. She listened when the women spoke in low voices of children taken away, of wagons in the night. And she told them something they had never expected to hear from the mistress of the house: I believe you. Trust was slow to come. But one evening, Ruth grasped Catherine's wrist, eyes fierce. You want to stop this, Mrs. Ruth whispered. Catherine hesitated, then nodded. Then you need Samuel, Ruth said. The boy watches. He knows things even his father don't. Catherine's stomach tightened. Samuel, the child who had spoken so coldly of removing people. Could he be an ally, or was he already too much his father's son? The answer came sooner than she expected. One evening, she found Samuel in the library, standing by the tall shelves with a candle, reading a book far too advanced for his age, Principles of Anatomy. You'll ruin your eyes, Catherine said softly. He glanced up, smirking. I already know half of this, Mother. She sat across from him, studying the boy. His pale gray eyes reflected the candlelight, unreadable. Samuel, she said carefully, you hear more than you say. You see more than you show. Tell me, what do you think of your father's work? Samuel closed the book with a snap. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he leaned forward, voice low. I think Father is dying, he said. And when he is gone, someone must continue. That is why Hargrove looks at me the way he does. He calls me gifted. Catherine's chest tightened. She forced her voice steady. And is that what you want? To continue this? Samuel tilted his head. I haven't decided, but I know this. Power comes to those who hold secrets. And I have more secrets than Father thinks. His lips curled in a half smile. If you want to stop him, Mother, you'll need me. Catherine shivered. The boy was 12 years old and already spoke like a man with a dagger behind his back. But Ruth had been right, he was the key. Together, in quiet moments, Catherine and Samuel formed a strange alliance. She shared with him what she had seen at Evergreen, the masked men and their plans. He revealed where his father kept letters hidden, which servants carried messages, which visitors came at night. But Samuel's help always came with an edge. He would pause, watching her closely, as if testing whether she was strong enough to use the knowledge, or weak enough to be crushed by it. One evening, after showing her a coded ledger, Samuel whispered, Do you ever wonder, Mother, whether we are better than them? The ones in chains. Catherine stiffened. Of course we are not. We are all human. Samuel's smile was thin. That is not what Father says. I don't care what Father says, she snapped, her voice sharp with sudden fury. For the first time, Samuel flinched. He looked at her not with coldness, but with something like curiosity. The turning point came in September of that year. Nathaniel, sicker than ever, summoned Hargrove to Sweetwater. The doctor arrived with trunks of instruments, filling the house with the metallic stink of polished brass. They converted one of the upstairs rooms into what Nathaniel called the study chamber. But Catherine, peeking through the keyhole one night, knew it for what it was, a laboratory for human experimentation. Inside, a young boy was strapped to a chair, trembling, as Hargrove measured his skull and tested his reflexes with cruel prods. Nathaniel sat coughing in a chair, pale but feverishly recording notes. Catherine pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a scream. When she turned away from the keyhole, Samuel was standing behind her. His expression was unreadable. "Now you see," he whispered. Her hands shook. "It has to end, Samuel. We cannot let this continue." The boy tilted his head. "Then we'll need to be cleverer than father. Cleverer than Hargrove. Cleverer than all of them." And in that moment, Catherine realized, her war had truly begun. She would fight not only Nathaniel and the society, but the creeping shadow inside her own son. Because Samuel was watching, learning, deciding, and if she failed, the future of Sweetwater would belong to him. Right finger, do you think Catherine can outwit Nathaniel before Samuel embraces his father's darkness? Comment your thoughts below. Don't forget to like and share to keep this story alive. Stay with us for part 8, where Catherine makes her first deadly move against the society. Sweetwater Plantation, Part 8, The First Strike. Hook. Every war begins with a single move. Catherine Brennan had waited, plotted, and poisoned in silence. But in the fall of 1839, she made her first strike against the men who called themselves the Society. It was not with guns. It was not with fire. It was with a poisoned glass. Part 8. By October, Nathaniel Brennan was a shadow of the man he had once been. His skin had turned pale, his hands trembled when he tried to hold his pen, and his coughing fits shook the walls of Sweetwater. He thought it was winter sickness. He thought it was weakness in his blood. But Catherine knew the truth. Every swallow of whiskey carried another grain of foxglove. She could have ended him then, quickly. But Catherine wasn't ready. Death was too merciful. What she wanted was collapse. And so she turned her attention to his ally, Drive. Cornelius Hargrove. Hargrove had returned to Sweetwater in late October, his carriage rattling up the red clay drive with a trunk full of brass calipers, charts, and new journals. He walked with pompous pride, like a man arriving at a university instead of a plantation. But Catherine noticed something else about him. He drank heavily. Wine with dinner, brandy after supper, whiskey when Nathaniel retired coughing to bed. His glass was rarely empty. And so Catherine decided that Hargrove would be her first victim. Not to kill, at least not at once. But to weaken him, to rattle his certainty, to make him doubt his own mind. The chance came at supper 3 nights after his arrival. The house was quiet except for the clatter of silverware. Nathaniel coughed through the meal, pausing only to mutter questions about plantation yields. Hargrove pontificated about his progress in cataloging Samuel's abilities, speaking of the boy as though he were a prize stallion. Catherine poured wine into Hargrove's cup, her hand perfectly steady. But the bottle she poured from was not the one he thought. She had prepared it hours before, slipping foxglove powder into the dark red liquid. "Another glass, doctor?" she asked sweetly. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Brennan, thank you." He raised it in salute. To progress, Catherine echoed, her smile hiding the fire in her chest. By morning, Hargrove was pale. He complained of nausea, of strange pounding in his chest. "It must be the southern air," he muttered. "So thick and damp, unsuitable for a man of letters." Catherine fussed over him with the care of a perfect hostess. She offered him broth, suggested rest, and refilled his cup each evening with careful hands. The effects were subtle but unmistakable. His speech began to wander. His handwriting in the ledgers grew shaky. And when he measured one of the children, his hand slipped, pinching the boy's ear until the child cried out. The enslaved women whispered that the doctor was cursed. Catherine encouraged the rumor quietly, letting it spread like smoke through the quarters. But her victory came at a cost. Samuel noticed. One evening, Catherine found him standing by the study fire, staring at her with those cold gray eyes. "You poisoned him, didn't you?" the boy said. Her breath caught. What makes you say that? Samuel tilted his head. Because I would have done the same. Only faster. Catherine's stomach nodded. You must never speak of this. The boy's lips curved into a thin smile. I won't. We're allies, aren't we, Mother? Allies. The word chilled her. She had hoped Samuel might be saved from Nathaniel's shadow, but instead he seemed drawn deeper into it. He admired cunning. He respected cruelty. And now he had seen her commit both. Hargrove's decline accelerated. By November he was bedridden, sweating through his sheets, muttering incoherently about bloodlines and destiny. One night Catherine sat at his bedside, pretending to offer comfort. In truth, she was listening. And what she heard froze her blood. Network, letters from Virginia, Louisiana, breeding lines established, papers to Charleston, archive must survive even if Brennan falls. She leaned closer, pressing the damp cloth to his forehead. Where are the papers, doctor? But he only groaned, slipping into fever. Still, she had enough. There were papers. Proof. If she could find them, she might have a weapon stronger than poison. Her search began the next morning. While Nathaniel slept late, coughing into his pillow, Catherine unlocked Hargrove's trunk. Inside were books, measuring instruments, and stacks of journals. She flipped through them, heart pounding. Each page was filled with notes, measurements of children, sketches of faces, diagrams of traits. Her eyes blurred as she read phrases like subject demonstrates increased cranial capacity and potential for lighter complexion in next generation. But in the bottom of the trunk she found something worse, letters sealed with wax. She opened one with shaking hands. Brother Hargrove, we look forward to your report from Georgia. Our success in Virginia proves the method works. 2 children of notable resemblance have already been placed in Charleston for study. The archive grows. Soon the world will see the science in our work. Catherine dropped the letter as if it burned her fingers. Charleston, Virginia. The network was real, vast, and thriving. And Nathaniel was not just a participant, he was a cornerstone. That night, Catherine hid the letters in her sewing basket beneath layers of cloth. She would not act yet, but she knew, one day these papers would bring the society down. For now, she returned to her role as hostess, serving meals, pouring drinks, watching as Nathaniel weakened and Hargrove wasted. But inside, she was sharpening herself into a weapon. By Christmas, Hargrove was too sick to travel. He begged Nathaniel to allow him to remain at Sweetwater through the winter. Catherine saw her chance. On Christmas Eve, when the enslaved families gathered in the quarters to sing and cling to fragments of joy, she prepared a final cup for the doctor. Stronger than the others, enough to silence him forever. She carried it to his room, the fire casting long shadows across the floor. He was awake, muttering, his eyes glazed with fever. Drink this, doctor, she whispered, holding the cup to his lips. He swallowed obediently, too weak to protest. Moments later, his breathing slowed. His lips turned blue. His hand twitched once on the blanket, and then stilled. Catherine set the empty cup on the nightstand, her face calm, her heart pounding. Dr. Cornelius Hargrove was dead. She returned to her room, washed her hands, and lay beside Nathaniel, who coughed himself to sleep without noticing her absence. But Samuel noticed. He stood in the doorway, silent as a shadow, watching her with unreadable eyes. You killed him, Samuel whispered. Yes, Catherine said simply. The boy's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. Good, he murmured. One less fool to share father's glory. Catherine closed her eyes. Her war had begun, yes, but the most dangerous battlefield might not be against the society at all. It might be against her own son. Right finger, do you think Catherine made the right move by killing Hargrove, or has she only made Samuel stronger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like and share if this story keeps you hooked. Stay tuned for part 9, where Catherine's secret war turns bloody, and the society begins to suspect betrayal inside Sweetwater. Sweetwater Plantation, Part 9, Blood on the Earth. Hook. Secrets never stay buried forever. At Sweetwater Plantation, Catherine Brennan had poisoned one man and weakened another. But in the winter of 1840, the first real blood was spilled, and it was not hers, or Nathaniel's. It was the blood of someone who dared to resist. Part 9. The death of Dr. Cornelius Hargrove was written off as illness. Nathaniel told the overseer and household staff that the doctor had succumbed to fever. His body was buried quickly in a shallow grave behind the orchard, with no marker. Catherine stood at the burial, her face carefully composed. Inside, she burned with satisfaction. One enemy gone, but she also knew, others would come. The society would not abandon Sweetwater because one of their own had died here. And Samuel, watching from the shadows, would not forget what she had done. By February, Nathaniel's health had worsened. He coughed blood into his handkerchiefs, though he still forced himself to work. His obsession only deepened. The breeding continued. 2 more women were pregnant, their futures and their children's futures written in Nathaniel's ledgers before they had even drawn breath. But Catherine sensed unrest among the enslaved people. The whispers grew louder. The women had begun to talk about poison, about curses, about the possibility that God himself had turned against their master. And then, one night, the whispers turned into action. It was Samuel who told her. He entered the library where Catherine was writing in her secret diary, and his gray eyes gleamed with something dark. "They're planning something," he said. Her heart lurched. "Who?" "The field hands. They mean to strike. Tonight." Catherine's hand tightened around her pen. "Strike." Samuel's lips curled in a half-smile. "They plan to kill the overseer." Catherine froze. The overseer, Mr. Talbot, was cruel, vicious with his whip, quick with his fists. She had long despised him, but the thought of open violence filled her with dread. "They won't succeed," Samuel said calmly. "Father may be sick, but the guards are still strong. The overseer will call for help. There will be punishment." His tone was almost excited. Catherine rose from her chair, panic in her chest. If rebellion began tonight, the retaliation would be brutal. The sound reached her before she left the house. A shout, sharp and ragged, cutting through the winter air. Then another. By the time she reached the yard, the night was alive with noise. The overseer stumbled from the cabins, blood running down his face. Behind him, 3 men rushed forward, enslaved men, their eyes blazing with fury. One held a broken hoe handle like a club. Another carried a kitchen knife. "Devils!" the overseer roared, swinging his whip wildly. "I'll gut you where you stand." The men rushed him, blows landing with sickening force. The overseer screamed, staggering backward, his whip falling from his hand. And then, silence. He collapsed onto the frozen ground, blood seeping into the dirt. The men stood over him, panting, their hands shaking. One of them, Jonah, a tall man with scarred cheeks, dropped the bloody hoe handle. His eyes met Catherine's across the yard. For a moment, time froze. Then Nathaniel's voice thundered from the porch. "What is this?" He stood in the doorway, pale and trembling, but his fury was like a whip crack. Behind him, 2 armed guards rushed into the yard, pistols drawn. The enslaved men froze. The moment of rebellion was over before it had even begun. "Kill them," Nathaniel rasped. The guards fired. 2 men fell instantly, their bodies jerking on the cold ground. Jonah staggered, clutching his chest, blood bubbling from his mouth. Catherine's scream tore from her throat before she could stop it. Nathaniel turned, his gray eyes narrowing. "Be silent, Catherine." Her hand flew to her mouth, her whole body shaking. The overseer lay dead. 3 men lay dead beside him. And Nathaniel, sick and weak, had shown that his control was still absolute. The aftermath was worse. The next day, Nathaniel ordered every enslaved person to gather in the yard. Catherine stood on the porch beside him, her stomach roiling, as he delivered his decree. "Let this be a lesson," Nathaniel croaked, coughing into his handkerchief. "Disobedience will be answered with blood. Sweetwater will not tolerate rebellion." He gestured to the overseer's corpse, laid out in a rough wooden box. He was a faithful servant of this house, struck down by those he tried to guide. Their punishment is already carried out. But should any of you forget your place again, your fate will be the same." The enslaved stood silent, their eyes dark, their grief and rage buried deep. Catherine felt it pressing around her like a storm waiting to break. She wanted to cry out, to say this cruelty would end, that justice would come. But Nathaniel's hand was on her arm, gripping hard, his nails digging into her flesh. "You will stand here," he whispered. "You will show them your loyalty. Or you will join them." She stayed silent. That night, Catherine sat in her room, trembling, her diary open before her. She wrote every detail, the men's names, the overseer's death, Nathaniel's command. Her tears stained the page, but her hand never stopped moving. When she finally looked up, Samuel was standing in the doorway again. "You see now," he said softly. "Fear keeps them in chains more than iron ever could." Her voice shook. "And you approve of this?" Samuel's gray eyes glinted. "I learn from it." He stepped closer, his tone almost playful. "Tell me, Mother, was it not thrilling to watch them strike? To see the overseer fall? For a moment, didn't you feel the power of it?" Catherine slapped him across the face before she even realized she had moved. The sound cracked through the room. Samuel staggered back, his cheek red, his eyes wide with shock. "Do not ever speak to me like that again," she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "Do not ever glory in blood." For the first time, Samuel's mask slipped. His expression was not cold or cruel, it was wounded. But then the mask returned, smoother than before. He bowed slightly, mocking. "As you wish, Mother." And he left her alone in the room, her hand trembling, her heart breaking. That winter night marked a turning point at Sweetwater. The overseer's blood had soaked into the ground, and with it, a new kind of darkness had taken root. The enslaved people were quieter than ever, their rebellion crushed before it could bloom. But Catherine knew, hatred still smoldered. And Samuel, her son, her husband's heir, was learning to feed on it. She pressed her hand against the diary, against the names of the dead. "If justice won't come from heaven," she whispered into the dark, "then it will come from me." And with those words, Catherine knew her war had only just begun. Right finger, what would you have done in Catherine's place? Stood silent, or risked everything to defy Nathaniel in public? Let me know in the comments. Hit like and share this story if you want more. Stay with us for part 10, where the society itself comes to Sweetwater, and Catherine faces her greatest test yet. Sweetwater Plantation, Part 10, The Devil's Inheritance. Hook. Every story of evil has an ending. But at Sweetwater Plantation, the ending was not peace, it was fire, blood, and the birth of something even darker. Part 10. By the spring of 1841, Sweetwater had become infamous. Whispers of its strange practices had traveled across Baldwin County. Other planters spoke of Nathaniel Brennan with a mix of respect and unease. He was sickly now, coughing blood and barely strong enough to walk the halls. But they still came to visit, drawn by rumors of the science he and Dr. Hargrove had started. The society came. It was a warm April evening when the first carriage rolled up the long oak drive. Catherine watched from the upstairs window as men stepped out, well-dressed planters, doctors, and merchants. There were 6 of them in all, their faces hard, their eyes bright with curiosity. They carried leather cases filled with papers, instruments, and small jars. Samuel stood at the front steps to greet them, tall and composed, his gray eyes shining with a confidence that chilled Catherine to her bones. He was only 14, yet he welcomed them like a master already. "Gentlemen," Samuel said with a bow, "Sweetwater is honored." They looked at him with admiration. One man laughed. "Your son, Brennan, already he has his father's bearing." From inside, Nathaniel wheezed and coughed but managed a smile. "More than my bearing. He will carry on my work." Catherine felt her stomach twist. The society gathered in the dining room that night. Catherine was forced to sit at the table, her hands folded, her face calm. But inside, every nerve burned with hatred. They spoke openly, as though the house itself protected them. They discussed breeding like farmers might discuss cattle. They compared notes on skull measurements, skin tones, temperaments. They praised Nathaniel's ledgers, which Catherine herself had written. And then one of them, Drive, Alcott, thin and sharp-eyed, asked about the missing children. Nathaniel hesitated. Catherine's heart froze. But Samuel leaned forward, his voice clear. The children are not lost. They are placed where they are most useful. Sweetwater is not alone in this. The society ensures that every promising child is cultivated. The men nodded, satisfied. Catherine nearly choked on her wine. Samuel had spoken their secret aloud, not with shame but with pride. She excused herself quickly, her chest tight with panic. In her room, she collapsed against the wall, her diary pressed to her chest. She realized then, Samuel was no longer a boy she could protect. He was his father's heir, fully corrupted, his soul twisted beyond recognition. The days that followed were worse. The society stayed for a week. They examined the women. They touched the children, measuring their limbs, studying their eyes. Catherine tried to intervene once, to stop a doctor from prying open a baby's mouth to inspect its teeth. The doctor sneered. It's for science, madam. Surely you understand. Nathaniel did nothing. Samuel watched with fascination. That night, Catherine went into the library after everyone slept. She took Nathaniel's ledger, her own diary, and Dr. Hargrove's notebooks. She bundled them in cloth and carried them out into the garden. There, under the cover of moonlight, she dug a hole with her bare hands, dirt filling her nails. She buried the books deep, whispering a prayer that someday, long after she was gone, someone would find them. Someone who could tell the truth. On the final night of the society's visit, Nathaniel called for a toast. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the glass. To the future, he rasped. To bloodlines perfected. To Sweetwater, the crown of the South. The men raised their glasses. Samuel raised his too, his face lit with fire. Catherine stared at them, a circle of devils dressed as gentlemen. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. She slipped away into the kitchen, her breath fast, her hands trembling. She took a lantern, she took oil, and she walked out into the night. The first flames began in the barn. They spread quickly, leaping from timber to timber, crackling loud enough to wake the night birds. By the time shouts rang out, the barn was an inferno. Catherine stood in the shadows, her heart hammering, watching the fire climb higher. The enslaved people stirred, rushing from their cabins. Confusion swept the yard, then another building caught, the smokehouse, then the storehouse. Panic rippled through Sweetwater. Inside the house, the society shouted orders. Nathaniel coughed violently, calling for Samuel. Samuel, tall and composed, ordered the guards to form lines, to protect the main house. But the fire spread faster than any man could fight. Sparks leapt into the dry fields. The night sky turned red. Catherine stood on the porch at last, her face lit by firelight. Nathaniel saw her then, his gray eyes wide with sudden understanding. You, he croaked, pointing a trembling finger. You did this. But his words dissolved in a fit of coughing. Blood stained his lips. He collapsed into Samuel's arms. Samuel looked up at her, fury blazing in his young face. For a moment, mother and son locked eyes. He knew. She knew he knew. And then the roof of the barn caved in, the crash drowning everything. By dawn, Sweetwater was half ash. The barn, the storehouses, the orchard, all gone. The society fled in the night, their fine coats singed, their papers lost in the flames. They would not return. Sweetwater's experiments were crippled, its future broken. Nathaniel survived the fire, but barely. His health shattered completely. Within a year, he was dead, buried in the family plot behind the ruined orchard. Samuel inherited everything. And Catherine lived on in silence, her hair turning gray, her eyes hollow. She never confessed. She never explained. But she knew what she had done. She had burned Sweetwater's future. Or so she thought. Because Samuel grew into a man sharper, colder, and more dangerous than his father had ever been. He rebuilt. He whispered to other planters. He carried the society's dream in his blood. And Catherine, in her last years, would wonder if she had failed. If by striking at Nathaniel, she had only created something worse. Sweetwater Plantation stood for another 20 years, its soil watered with blood and ash. The Civil War would come, and with it, the end of slavery. But some shadows never lifted. Some secrets remained buried in the red earth. And some say, on quiet nights, when the wind rustles the oaks, you can still hear Catherine Brennan's voice, whispering from the fire, warning anyone who dares to listen. Fire. That's the end of the Sweetwater saga, a story of horror, history, and the price of silence. Right finger, if you were Catherine, would you have burned it all sooner? Or tried to save Samuel from the darkness? Tell me in the comments. Thumbs up, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more haunting stories from history. Your support keeps these tales alive.